Hi, friends. It's Orktober! Orcs, orcs, orcs! Am I right, boys? Orc boys, that is. Woo! Orcs are my favorite Xeno species and probably my second biggest 40k army, which, come to think about it, maybe my little cracked brain just likes seeing a ton of little green men on the tabletop. But yes, orcs, orcs, orcs! Everyone's favorite silly, goofy, heavy metal, ramshackle Mad Max murder fungus. Orcs are a race perfectly suited to the grim dark 40k world. You know the classic line, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Well, when a normal person reads that, they might say, oh dear, well, that doesn't sound very pleasant at all. But an orc would say, oh, wow, that sounds like literal heaven. Yippee! Orcs literally only want one thing, and it's disgusting. And unlike regular boys who just want cool ass figurines to paint, or I guess hotties, or wherever that original quote was referencing, orc boys only want war! I mean, war! Orcs eat, sleep, and breathe war. And that's at least slightly literal. All of orc culture and biology revolves around war, warfare, and large military conflicts, aka war! The orcs are one of the oldest species in the galaxy and were literally biologically engineered for war. A long time ago, in a galaxy that is this one, the old ones, basically super intelligent, near godlike magic space lizards, created the Eldar and later the Kroorks in order to fight the Necrons in the war in heaven. That's a video for another time, but just know it was pretty nutty. And nutty times call for nutty dudes, and nutty the Kroorks were. Not a ton is known about them, but the Kroorks are the pinnacle of orc kind. They have all of the modern orc strengths tuned to 11 while also being extremely intelligent. They were the perfect warrior race as they were mostly self-sustaining, repopulate quickly, and got stronger based on how strong their opponents were. That last part was actually part of the reason why they became the weaker modern day orc. The war in heaven was astronomically nutty, a clash of gods with peak Necron, Eldar, and orcs along with some other wackos. So, after the war was ended, the Kroorks were basically malnourished as they no longer had super powerful foes to constantly fight. Consequently, they began to regress and were systematically hunted down by the Eldar. And as the years passed, the orcs became weaker and weaker until their modern day iteration. Which, the modern day orcs being the weak, watered down version of the orc race is pretty crazy considering their presence is usually an impossible to get rid of green apocalypse level event. But with that, what makes the orcs so dang dangerous? And why exactly are they a perfectly engineered warrior race? Because they're green, and green is best. But jorts, jokes plus orcs, aside, them being green actually is tied to one of their greatest strengths, their unending tides. But I'll get to that in a bit. First, I need to cover the basics. Orcs are incredibly tough and strong. Their bones are thicker and more dense than humans, they have simpler organs, less sensory nerves so they don't feel as much pain, and they have a layer of spongy flesh to lessen impacts. All these traits make the orcs very durable and deadly in combat. They're basically really, really hard to kill roided up gorillas with giant guns and swords. And that hard to kill part is no joke. Orcs can survive dismemberment, decapitation, impaling, crushing, and pretty much anything else, at least for a short time. And that short time is often enough time for them to shoot you in the face or crump you in return. In addition to this, remember that the orcs also get stronger than bigger the more they fight, the more powerful their opponents are, and the more unified they are. This makes orc wars incredibly dangerous as they unify orcs to a common cause and gather more and more greenskins to wage war, constantly powering themselves up. Now, back to green, and this next part doesn't really make sense for real science, but who gives a damn? This is 40k, rule of cool, baby! So, the orcs are supposedly green because they have chlorophyll in their blood and can photosynthesize. This, in conjunction with their ability to eat pretty much anything and the fact that their food literally grows with them, means that almost all their labor and supply lines can be dedicated to more DECA! Woo! To elaborate on their food situation, let me describe the typical orc reproduction cycle. And don't worry, kiddos, orcs reproduce in the boring way. That's to say they don't have sex, unlike us super cool Warhammer players. Orcs are technically a fungoid species, which makes no sense with the photosynthesis thing, since not being able to photosynthesize is a key differentiator between fungi and plant. But I quit biology, so I didn't have to think about biology anymore, so moving on. Also, sometimes orcs are said to be a third fungus, a third animal, and a third plant, specifically algae, but this also doesn't really make sense either, but whatever, it's 40k, not McGraw-Hill. So moving on, for real. The orcs are one of the most numerous, if not the most numerous factions in the entire galaxy. Psst, they're the most numerous. The orcs have been found in every corner of the galaxy, so there's no doubt at least 10 of them on the low end and more than 11 of them on the high end. Even worse, the orcs spread and reproduce at an astonishing rate, so if they don't quite inhabit every corner of their galaxy yet, they will eventually. So, just like Spirit Halloween, like a bazillion of them can just show up overnight and sow terror in the local population. Boom! Orktober, October callback, baby. But back to Sirius Town. Overnight is a bit of an overstatement, but they still reproduce very quickly. Orcs reproduce by releasing spores which incubate underground into little freakish plant wombs and gestate into various orcoid life forms. Often squigs are born first, then snotlings who start the food supply by herding the squigs and cultivating fungus, then the grots build important structures, and then finally, just like a blister, the orcs come after the hard work's done. They use all the stuff the lesser orcoid life forms so nicely made for them and go off to look for something to fight. This orc life cycle makes it almost impossible to fully eradicate the orcs since once you kill one of them, they release a bunch of spores to start the cycle anew. So usually once a planet is visited by the orcs, they have to deal with them for the rest of the time. But I now realize I just listed a bunch of names that might sound like a bunch of nonsense to normal people, so let's quickly segue into orc culture. The orcs essentially have a caste system in which the wacky critters I just described are put into. Much like playground children or the Decepticons, orcs believe that might is right and the biggest and strongest shall lead the rest of the boys. So, the squigs, snotlings, and grots are considered lesser beings since they're weak and small and can barely even fight. Usually. And as such, these little dudes are assigned to all the boring ass tasks like manufacturing, farming, being farmed, fixing things, and basically everything else actually essential to actually keeping their society functional. Meanwhile, the proper orcs get to do the fun stuff, like killing things. Woo! And then, even here, in their own subspecies, they're also put into soft classes. The run-of-the-mill orc is simply referred to as a boy, and these serve as the standard infantry of an orc. Wah! Although generally the weakest orc, the boys are still brutal green monster men that can kill most things, especially when he's joined by like a million other boys. Another important part of orc biology is that they all have some sort of innate knowledge coded into them. Usually this is just like a million different ways to brutally kill stuff, but sometimes it's things like engineering or magic, which brings us to the more specialized boys called odd boys. First up are the mech boys, who invent and fix all the orcs' technology. They can pretty much fix or make anything, but they don't truly understand how the machines work, rather they just rely on their genetic instincts to get the job done. To demonstrate their absolute genius, here's one of their greatest inventions. It's called a shock attack gun. Oh, alright, sounds like an electricity gun. Impressive, but kinda sci-fi basic if you ask me. If you thought that, well, you need to think like an orc, buddy. Sure, a shock attack gun probably uses electricity somewhere, but this beauty's main form of attack is to create a small tunnel through the warp that snotlings are blasted through, or sometimes they run through the tunnels, which actually that's kind of funnier, so let's just go with that. And basically, this gun teleports snotlings into whatever the orc is shooting at. Then the snotling goes crazy style and wrecks whatever it's shot at, or I guess shot in. Pretty wizard. Then, pain boys have PhDs coded into their DNA and serve as the surgeons and doctors of Orc Society. This usually just amounts to them haphazardly replacing limbs with robot limbs, injecting a variety of strange drugs, and role-playing the ancient Terran hero of Victory Frankenstein. And then weird boys have my middle school self coded into their DNA. I'm just kidding, of course, they aren't nearly that weird, and are actually far more focused on magic. Regrettably, I wasn't able to teleport or shoot lightning in middle school. But yes, the weird boys, they use magic. All orcs emanate a psychic energy, which we'll get into a bit more later, and the weird boys absorb this energy and can channel them into various abilities like teleportation, giant psychic punches, shooting lightning, shooting fire, shooting lasers, etc., etc. And then next up, the most important odd boy, the brew boys. Because what's the point of having an army of boys if you can't crack a cold one with them? Then, up the totem pole, you got the knobs, which some would argue that a knob would actually be down the totem pole, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink. Much like goldfish or lobsters, orcs continuously grow in their lifetime, and the ones that fight hard enough or long enough grow to be very powerful. These are the knobs, and they serve as the leaders of orc society since they're bigger, stronger, and meaner than the rest of those gits. Some knob types are Mega Knobs, who wear Mega Armor, which is basically Orc Power Armor, the best suits being comparable to Terminator Armor. Other than durability, the Orcs also, of course, strap a bunch of guns to these. Then there's the Flash Skits, which are the richest Orcs who have the bestest and biggest guns. Then there's the Cyborgs, who are Orcs gravely injured in battle, but deemed important enough to be cybernetically reconstructed by the Pain Boys. And then there's some other ones. And then finally, on the top of the top, there's the War Boss, who's the biggest, the baddest, and the most brutally cunning of all the Orcs. He, of course, gets all the best stuff and leads the wars! Finally, for Orc society, they often group up into tribes, and these tribes group up into clans, each clan having a unique color scheme and specialty. Quickly, the 6 biggest ones are the Goths, who love checkers, and the strongest Orcs, who also extra love melee, the Death Skulls, who are lucky and like to steal stuff, the Snake Bites, who are boomers who think that technology is stupid and scary, the Evil Sons, who like to go fast and paint everything hot rod red, and then the Blood Axes, who are the first to find humans and adopt some of their tactics, such as actually using tactics, and they also trade or act as mercenaries sometimes. And then there's many lesser clans. Next, let's cover Orc beliefs, both their religion and famous psychic gestalt. Orcs believe in 2 gods. Why do they need 2 gods? Well, because it would be stupid to be a super powerful god since you could just crump everything else with ease, and that's boring. Therefore, they need a buddy to fight with. So there's Gork and Mork. One's brutally cunning, and the other one's cunningly brutal, wholly embodying the complex Orc war philosophies. And to close off this holy Orc trinity is Gazkul, the prophet of the wall, and technically Orc Jesus. Like, come on, he was reborn a number of times, performs Orc miracles, and killing a ton of things is the closest Orc analog of going around performing good deeds and spreading benevolent teachings. Then, on the other side of the Orc belief coin is their unique species-wide psychic ability called the Psychic Gestalt, a concept who gives the stupid-ass shovel memes a run for their misconception money. The Psychic Gestalt is essentially a psychic field made up of the psychic aura of every Orc in an area and can have tangible effects based on the collective Orc belief. However, this effect is very, very often over-exaggerated in memes and stuff to a, quite frankly, stupid degree. Orcs cannot just imagine anything they want into existence, otherwise they would just own the setting since every Orc legitimately and strongly believes that they are the bestest. No, the Gestalt effect is much more subtle, and although some sources do vary, I like to think of it as a reality loop, meaning that it could help Orc things work better, but isn't a Green Lantern ring or a reality stone. So, for example, an Orc can't just imagine a brick as a gun and shoot it, or a jar of mayonnaise as a saxophone and play the blues. Rather, they can believe that their shitty gun isn't so shitty and it actually functions properly, whereas in the hands of another species, it would just be a piece of crap that jams every other shot. This is also where the color thing comes into play. Some say that the Orc color thing isn't real, both in lore and on a metatextual level, but I personally subscribe to the idea that it does give subtle bonuses because it's more fun and other factions have at least low-level reality warping born of belief, so Orcs having it makes sense. So red goes faster, blue is lucky, yellow's exploding, and so on. Another way this manifests is in their wars! Orc wars! Are basically Orc crusades where they go plan to plan, destroying everything in their warpath. As previously mentioned, when on a war, the more Orcs there are, the stronger they get, and this is from the Psychic Assault. Usually Orcs are scattered and fight each other as often as they fight other races. However, sometimes the Orcs will band together and go on a war. Unified, the Orcs becomes bigger, stronger, and slightly smarter. They also use their Psychic Gestalt to unknowingly navigate their space hulks, rocks, attack moons, and whatever vessels they have to get onto other planets right for a crumpin'. And finally, let's just talk about why everyone loves Orcs. The Orcs are goofy comic relief, they have cartoony antics, silly dialogue, fun, wacky contraptions and weapons, and they're just really fun. As long as you're an Orc. To literally everyone else, Orcs are a proper grim-dark monster. To face an unending tide of excessively cruel, relentlessly durable green monsters who literally only want war is a hopeless nightmare. Kill an Orc and hundreds will replace it. The more you fight a war, the stronger it gets unless you utterly eradicate it. Orcs are everywhere, and they're not leaving anytime soon. Then, from a hobby perspective, they're just such a fun faction with so much baked in creative freedom. Yes, you could technically kit bash anything for any faction, but to me, I like to at least follow the lore a little bit for my hobby projects, so having a faction that's known for stealing stuff, making ramshackle gear, and using pretty much whatever is a kit basher's dream. After all, every kit is an orc kit. So, to me, orcs are so beloved because they perfectly embody everything people love about 40k. They're over the top goofy at times, but they're also a grimdark nightmare. They make fun characters and stories, and are awesome from a hobby perspective. They are truly the Warhammer 40,000. But yeah, that's the orcs. The best Xenos in my opinion, and the only faction in 40k where the majority of them are having a good time. They're literally in orc heaven. Green is truly the best. So let me know what you think of the orcs and what your favorite clan is. I definitely want to make more orc videos, and the reason I haven't so far is honestly because I didn't like the way I drew them up until recently, so be on the lookout for more specific orc videos, maybe like orc units or Gazcole. And thank you for watching, and thank you to all my patrons who help the channel grow and improve. I appreciate it greatly. And as always, please like, comment, subscribe, and consider sharing to all your 1/3 fungus, 1/3 plant, and 1/3 animal genetically engineered warriors. Thanks! Wait, I forgot to mention, their hair is squigs. All orcs are bald, and if they do have hair, it's a squig subspecies. Damn it!